Well, hey, what's up, North Point Church? So good to see you. Hope you had a Merry Christmas, feeling merrier than ever. Probably, hopefully not too hungover, maybe a little bit heavier than usual. I know that Christmas was really good to me in some parts of my body. But if you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Torres, and I get to help out here with the team, one of the teaching pastors, as well as one of the campus pastors. And Jeremy's going to be back with you next week, starting a brand new series, which we're very excited for. So you're going to want to be sure to tune in then. But today I have kind of a one-off message, and actually I had a different message prepared, but my wife came up to me this week and asked me, did I pray about it? Which, you know, my response was, yeah, which totally means no, I didn't. So I went and I prayed, and I felt God wanted me to speak on something else. So that's what we're going to do here today. And I want to begin by asking everybody a question. This year, have you ran into somebody and asked them how they were doing, and you got this response? I am so good. Man, life is just, this year has been just a refreshment for my soul. It's been so good. What a year 2020 has been. I haven't heard that. And if I had, I'd probably ask them, what is it you're smoking? Because I want some of that. Right? We don't hear those conversations. And why is it? Why has there not been any joy at all this year? And what I think is that when we look back on 2020, it won't be remembered as a year of a lot of joy. It'll be remembered as a year of lots of sorrow, lots of heartache, lots of fear, lots of confusion, lots of challenges. But what about the joy? You know, it's interesting. The other night I was putting my children to bed, and we have this bedtime routine where I'll give them a bath, and then I'll help them brush their teeth, and then I'll read them a story, and then I'll pray with them, and we'll put them to bed. Well, most of the time that routine is just something I'm trying to get through. Not really there all the time, just trying to get through it. And this particular day was a bad day. It had been raining all day long. It was, I was stuck inside the house. I don't like gray skies. I was tired of COVID, tired of not being able to see people. I was stressed out. I had a lot to do. And to be honest, I just kind of wanted to watch TV. But during bath time, I realized that I was just kind of zoned out. You ever have one of those stares where you're just like, you're kind of looking, but you're not really looking at anything. It kind of feels a little cloudy. I hate when it happens when I'm talking to people, when I'm looking at somebody, but I'm not really looking, and then they move, and it's like my eyes have to trail to catch up. It was like one of those stares, like a foggy stare. And I was sitting there, and I was kind of out of it through everything, through the prayer, brushing the teeth, everything. And when I laid my son, Hezekiah, down in bed, and I prayed with him, I told him that the next week was going to look very much the same, because my son had the same kind of day I did. He was stuck inside, couldn't ride his bike, couldn't hang out with friends, couldn't do any of that. And I told him the next week was going to look the same, that the weather report forecasted rain all next week. And he looked at me, and here's what he said. He said, "Dad, I love you." And then he turned with a smile on his face, and he laid his head on his pillow, and he said, "God, thank you for the greatest day ever." You know what I said to my son? I said, "Son, what are you smoking?" I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. But as I was reflecting on this later, I got to my room and I asked myself, I said, why was it that my son had the greatest day ever when clearly it was the suckiest day ever? It was absolutely awful. Why would he say it was the greatest day ever? Well, he had joy in every moment. Bath time, he was joyful. Brushing his teeth, he was having a ball. He was singing songs. His day was filled with joy. And well, mine wasn't. And here's what I realized about my life is that most of my life is spent in transit, right? I'm always trying to get from one place to another. I'm waiting in a line. I'm waiting for a meeting to end. I'm hoping for a meeting to end, especially my meetings that I have. Whatever it is, I'm trying to get somewhere else. And what I do is I kind of divide my life into two categories between living and wanting to live. And when I do that, I miss joy. That's now because I'm always looking for joy in the future or looking back at joy that has passed. And I miss what's going on here in the moment. And right, I think we all kind of live with this some sort of illusion that joy will come later in life once circumstances change. Right? We think when we're in school that we'll be much happier once we graduate. If we're single, we think we'll be much happier once we get married. And then we get married. And then we think we'll be much happier if we just have kids. And then we have kids, and dear Lord, we cannot wait until they move out. And then they move out, and we think, well, we were much happier when they were here. And it's those moments that we're likely to not be fully present, to not find joy in it because we're looking for joy somewhere else. We're not likely to hear the voice of God. And it's funny because I read one time a biblical writer, he wrote Psalm 118, and here's what he said. He said, "This is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it." He didn't say that yesterday was the best that we're ever going to have, and oh, if we could just go back. He doesn't say that tomorrow's going to be the day, or 2021 will be the year. He says today, right now, today, every moment, every minute is a reason to have joy. And that's because God made it. So why is it then that so many times, almost every time, in a mundane moment, why am I so disconnected from joy? When for my son, the day was the same. I met a guy in the streets of Skid Row. I used to live in Los Angeles, California, and a lot of people in Skid Row are living life in transit. They don't have a home to live in. A lot of them have fallen on hard times, don't have family to depend on. And there was this one guy, and every day when I would come up to him or pass him, I would always ask him, "Hey man, how you doing?" And his response was crazy. His response was, "Oh man, it's a great day. It's a great day. I'm great." And I'm like, "What? Like, dude, your life is pretty hard." But he would say to me, "Look up at the sky. Is the sky blue? Are the clouds out? Did the sun come up today? Will the sun come up tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah." He said, do you have air? Are you able to breathe?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "The day never changes. Every day is the same. God created it. What changes is our perspective on how each of us see the day." And I said, "Man, I want to live a life like that. I want to find joy in every moment. But sometimes I don't understand it." The other day I was upstairs at my house, and my son, my 4-year-old, was with me, and my dog starts jumping at the back door. He's a little puppy. He's got this crazy high spring nose, very antelope-ish, and he like taps on the door when he wants to go out. So I told my son, I said, "Hey, can you go down and let the dog out?" And he said, "Why?" He's in that stage. Why? And so I'm like, "He just needs some fresh air." Well, my son heard this, and he didn't know what I said, and so he called it freshing air. And so he asked me, he says, "Dad, why does he need freshing air?" And I kind of smirked. I didn't really say anything. I just said, "Because he does, son. Can you let him out?" And as my son started to walk down the stairs, I could hear him start to take these really deep breaths. He started going, And then as he got to the bottom of the stairs, he started to kind of pat his belly and rub his belly and go, oh, I just need freshing air. I need some freshing air. And then he started to sing songs to the freshing air. He started to say, ooh, I love you, freshing air, I love you. And my son didn't even know what freshing air was. He thought he did. He thought he needed it, and he thought he was looking for it. And he had this idea of what it could be, but he was never going to find it because he didn't know what it was that he was looking for. And here's moral of the story is this, is when it comes to our joy, we have this idea of what it is. But until we know exactly what it is we're looking for, we'll never be full of joy. We'll never have joy in every moment of every day. So I want to talk to you about Jesus in John chapter 15. He says something that's really, really fascinating to me. He gives an analogy of these grapes and a vine and a branch, which was actually very common in that day. A lot of nations did this. But Jesus in John chapter 15, verse 5, he says, I am the vine and you are the branches. And if you remain in me and I in you, well, you will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Now, later on in verse 9 through 11, he says this, and this is where I want to kind of park today and talk to you guys about today. He says this, he says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Now, like I said, the nation of Israel was used to hearing analogies like this. See, in the Old Testament, thousands of years before Jesus came, the vineyard, the vine, and the branches was used to illustrate when countries, most of the time, were not bearing fruit. Whenever, and the vineyard was actually the land that God had promised them for the nation of Israel, and it was the temple. So whenever the nation was not bearing fruit, when they had been removed from the land, or they were the temple had been destroyed, you'll find them grieving, you'll find them mourning, you'll find them wishing for the day that they could get back to this specific place, because the vineyard was a place. Well, Jesus kind of turns this analogy around and he says, hey, the vine that produces life, that bears fruit, is no longer a place, but it's a person. It's me. And if you have a deep attachment to me, well, then you'll be able to bear fruit in your life. Now, the Greek word for fruit is the word karpous. Now, this word, what it means is it literally means result, right? The result of a branch that's connected to a grapevine is that it produces fruit. That's the result of the connection. Jesus says the result of a connection to me is bearing this fruit. Question is, what's the fruit? Well, if we take a look back at this passage, he tells us in John 15:11, he says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy, well, it may be complete. Well, as I was studying this, I looked at that word complete and I was like, man, I want to do some research on that. What does it mean to have complete joy? Because I want to have complete joy. And he says, literally, it means this. It means filled or well supplied with something. And I thought to myself, I don't think my joy is well supplied in my life. I don't think I'm full of it. And how many of you would say your joy is well supplied, that you've just got a stockpile of joy in your life? Figuratively, what this word complete means is the imagery it would give is of a net being crammed full of what it was supposed to be filled with. They're surrounded by fishermen. That was a common analogy that they would use also. So here's what I did, is I went and I brought a net. And I want to kind of give you a couple of truths that I've learned about joy as we look at this net. And here's the first thing I've learned about joy, is that joy is designed to be filled. It's designed to be filled, right? When you look at a net, right? Whenever they were in the net factory with the net engineers or whatever it was, whenever they looked at and designed this net, there was a specific purpose in mind, that it would be filled, that it would be used. Well, when they designed it for something very specific. In this case, it's this soccer ball. Now, when they were planning this and thinking about the dynamics and how it would hold it and what it would do, they did it with this in mind. That's their primary concern, was how it could hold this specific thing. But it also could be true, and would be true, that while they had this in mind, they probably didn't have a lot of other things in mind. When they thought about this net, they only thought about this. They didn't really care about what else would go into this net, or if the net would even be able to hold it, because their primary concern was this ball. Now, I love salt. I don't know about you, but I love salt. I love salty things. I love salty popcorn. I love salty pretzels. I even love salty people. I like being around them because I get a good laugh. I love it. You might too, but I love salt. And did you know that in 1 cup of salt, there is 1 million little grains of salt? Little tiny little grains. And I love it. Now, I love salt, but the net wasn't designed to carry salt. And just because I would look into this and say, oh, there's 1 million of these things in here, I would love for these to fill my joy because I love them. I can put it into the net all day long, but the net is not going to hold the salt. It's not going to keep the salt in it because it wasn't designed to be filled with the salt. And now what happens is I have this game of find and fill. Now I'm constantly trying to pick up this salt and get it back into the bag, and it keeps falling out. And now I'm searching. And we do this with our joy. It's not that salt is a bad thing. It just wasn't designed to fill your joy. We look at these little grains and we go, oh, there's so many of them. I love video games. Well, I could find it in my spouse. I could find it in this career. I could find it with this friend, or if I was popular, or money. And we're doing this, and we're trying to stuff, and we're exhausting ourselves, and our joy is never full. If I could just have this, one more of this, bigger paycheck, TV. Now, listen, I'm not anti-TV. I get my fair share. But to be honest, just like that night in the bathroom when I was giving my boys a bath, I think there's this thought that TV will fill our joy. But when was the last time you've ever had a conversation with somebody and it went like this? Man, I started a show yesterday at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and I watched it to the early hours of the morning. And gosh, man, let me tell you, I am feeling rejuvenated. I mean, so refreshed. I'm like a new me. Man, what a monumental moment that was in history. I will never forget that day. Thank God for TV. TV's not a bad thing. Careers aren't a bad thing. Friends, spouses, none of that is bad. It's just not big enough. It's not big enough to fill this net. Listen, if God gave you a net to hold something big, it'll never hold on to something small. It's not what it was designed to do. It was designed to be filled, and the thing that is supposed to fill it is a love for God, and it's a love for people. That's his 2 commands. He says, love me and love people. And if we can do that, if we can keep this, well, then our net remains full. But I've also learned that while good things, although small, won't fit in the net, sometimes the biggest intruder in our net, and I got Thanos here. Clearly I chose him because his physique closely matches mine. Nah, I'm just kidding. really, my dog has chewed up all the other action figures we have. So Thanos is the best one. Now, what happens is when it comes to our joy, a lot of times the thing that stops a love for God and a love for people is ourselves. Ourselves. We get in the way and we don't allow this to get into the bag. I've found that when it comes to my joy, the number one enemy is this preoccupation I have with myself. The insecurities that dominate my mind, the thoughts of what I am presently thinking of will bring me joy later on. And when that is here, I can't fit in. Thoughts and joy of serving others. I just can't. I can't fit in time to sit and be with God in his presence. When this is in the way, when you're stuffing your net with small things or the wrong things get in the way, it keeps us from doing what our nets was designed to do, which was to be filled with Jesus and a love for people. Second thing I've learned is this, when I was looking at my net and thinking about my net, I realized that my net, while it's designed to be filled, once it's filled, it's meant to be carried, right? I put the ball in the net so that I can carry it. That's really the purpose of the net, is to carry something. Now, when we think about our joy, what would the purpose of our joy be? Well, I wrote it down this way. Joyful is joy with purpose. It's joy with purpose. When I look at this net and I put the ball in the net, I am able to transport this now with me wherever I go. The ball doesn't stay at home. The ball doesn't stay on my nightstand. The ball doesn't stay open with an 8 a.m. coffee next to it. The ball comes with me wherever I go. When it comes to my joy, when the source of my joy, the foundation of what fills my joy is with me, I get to carry it. I become a joy carrier. And what I love about this is, like most nets are very see-through. You can definitely see through this. If I was to come up to you and ask you without even hearing this sermon, and I was to show you this and ask you what's inside this net, you would say, a ball. Because you can see it. You can see what is the source of what fills this net. Here's what I want you to know about your joy. When you and I become joy carriers, people can see the source of what fills our joy. And I wrote this down in your notes, that when the source of joy becomes visible, then our faith becomes viable. When people can see a net, joy that's filled with a love for God and a love for people, they want in. And that's how Jesus intended it. John chapter 15 is actually part of a way bigger discourse of Jesus before he takes to the cross. He's meeting with his closest friends and disciples. And he's actually talking to them all the way through the end of chapter 17. So it's a long thing. And as he's talking, he ends it by praying, and he prays to God. And he asks God to help them. Here's what he says in chapter 17, 22 through 23. He says, I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I and them and you and me. Jesus is praying that this would happen in our lives so that they may be brought to complete unity with God and with people. Then, here it is, the world will know that you had sent me and loved me, even as you have loved me. Listen, when you become a joy carrier, when people can see that Jesus' love, that remaining in Jesus, that your life is so full of Jesus and your life is so full of serving other people and loving people sacrificially, they're going to want in. Because here's what I see a lot of is while this is how it's designed to be, oftentimes this is how it looks. A lot of times there's a lot of empty nets walking around. And even in the church, there's a lot of empty nets walking around. Life without joy, life without happiness. It's not that Jesus said in this passage that we were too happy for his taste. He said basically, you're not happy enough. You don't have enough joy. And when your joy is made complete, well, then the world is going to know that I have loved you. But when we walk around with an empty net, we've got nothing to show. And people, a lot of times, they don't have a problem with Jesus. The people, the non-carriers, the non-Christians, they don't have a problem with Jesus. They don't have a problem with what he taught. They oftentimes have a problem with Christians. But what they claim to be carrying around, they don't actually see. A survey was done, and the top 3 things that people had a problem with Christianity didn't actually include Jesus. It had to do with Christians. They believed that they were mean, they believed they were judgmental, and they believed they were hypocrites. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to make any mistakes, and we certainly can't live a life exactly like Jesus did. That's why we need Jesus. But what I'm saying is what if they saw less of this, less empty nets, and they saw more of this? What if when a Christian or non-Christians were able to see us so full of Jesus and love for people that it changed the perspective in which they viewed the love that we have for our God? Well, I bet it would change a lot of nets out there if that's what they were able to see. If they were able to look at us and say that, they might say, man, I want in on that joy. What if we preached less and we smiled more? Proverbs says a smiling face makes us happy. What if we did that? What if we worried less about stuffing other people's nets, of trying to give everybody else the joy of Jesus, and we honed in more on just serving them and loving them and spending more time with Jesus ourselves? And I think that would change the game, and I think that was the very purpose of why Jesus gave us this net. Now listen, if you've fallen on hard times or you've gone through something, you've lost someone, you've been through a tragic situation or some trauma, I'm not saying there's never a time to grieve or to be sad. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the joy of having God and love for people in your life is bigger, and it's big enough to carry you through those times. There's a biblical character. His name was Nehemiah. He was in the Old Testament, and he grieved. His city, his vineyard, was destroyed where he came from. It was in rubble, and he wanted to rebuild it. And time after time, he kept meeting obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. But Nehemiah, he said something very interesting. He said, go and enjoy choice food and drink. Share them with the people that don't have anything, don't have any prepared. And then he says this. He says, this day is holy to our God, so don't grieve. For the joy of the Lord is our strength. See, God's joy is big enough to carry you through those hard times. It's big enough to give you strength when you're going through some of the worst things you'll have to go through. In fact, here's what I believe. I believe the true test of full joy is actually found in how we're able to endure hardships. And I think James would agree with me in James chapter 1. He says this, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, that whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, let perseverance finish its work, that you may be mature, complete, and lacking nothing. Friends, let me ask you a question. Where are you on the spectrum of joy? On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you find yourself? 1 being a joy killer, 10 being a joy carrier. Where would you be? Better yet, it's probably more important, where would your spouse say that you were? Where would a friend or a coworker say that you were on the joy spectrum? Where would it be? Now, no matter where you find yourself, I think we all have an opportunity to grow. So I want to give you 2 quick things that you can do this week. Here's your homework, super quick. But spend less time with the joy suckers and spend more time with joy carriers. Right? We want to have those kind of joy mentors in our life that are full of God, full of a love for people, and set a joy appointment with them. Go and be with them. Go hang out, spend time. And we all know the joy suckers, right? We got to do our best to love them, but we definitely don't want them dominating our agendas or influencing our hearts. So we got to spend less time. In fact, to have more joy in your life, go home, write out a list of those that you know that are joy suckers, call them all and tell them they suck the joy out of you. I bet that'll be a joyful moment. I'm just kidding. Do not do that, especially if it's me. Do not call me after this message. If I have stolen your joy. Second thing is this: spend more time with Jesus in prayer. Sometimes reading this Bible can become mundane to me. Sometimes it can. But Jesus says, stay connected with me. Remain in my presence. Sit with God. Ask God, God, what's getting in the way of me having true joy? Why can't I be full? And Jesus says that as you remain in him and he in you, that you will bear much fruit. And I want to close with this. Jesus in John 15:11, he said that your joy is made complete when you fill it with him. But he also said this. He said that his joy might be found in you. Jesus' net, so full of joy to know us, to live for us, even to die for us. As he took the cross, Hebrews 12:2 says this, says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Jesus loves you so much. He finds so much joy in you. And he just wants to be the very source of your joy because he created it that way. So let me pray and we'll get out of here. God, thank you for the joy you've given us. God, I pray that we would all become joy carriers, full of your presence, full of your love, and full of a love for people. God, help us to remove ourselves that can stop that. Help us to not depend on smaller things that bring us happiness to fill our nets. God, let it be full of you. Jesus, you are so good. Thank you for loving us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.